Join me in the audio garden to cultivate our collective wisdom, nurture creativity, and spread love. My name is Martha CINADER. Welcome to Listen and Be Heard. Yes, welcome to the Listen and Be Heard hour for readers and writers. My name is Martha CINADER and I'm joined by Tony Robles. Are you there, Tony? Hello?
Yes, I am.
There he is.
I had to unmute myself.
Okay, so glad to have you here in the audio garden for episode 15 of the Listen and Be Heard hour of readers and writers. Coming up, we will be talking with, we'll be hearing from Sharon Scott about the future with radio thriving in a tapestry of resilient regions across the continent known as Turtle Island. Sharon is the author of Low Power FM for Dummies, and we will also consider the past through a lens of poetry and music mistressfully brought to us by JULIA CABADING, by way of a commissioned CD that looks and reads like a book and sounds very jazzy. We'll also hear comments about banning books from ERNIE BRILL. And Tony, you and I are going to be talking a little bit about another banned book situation in North Carolina.
Yes. The McDowell High School group of students has galvanized a group in resistance to some book banning that's gone on at their school. You mentioned Caroline Cabading, good friend, wonderful, wonderful musician, wonderful CD, combining poetry, music,
Cabotting. My
and it's
apologies for
beautiful.
saying that incorrectly.
No problem.
Yes, and we're actually going to be interviewing Carolyn next week on WLBH.org and bringing
Mm.
that to everyone on a future episode of the Hour for Readers and Writers. And before we go on, why don't we go ahead and listen to just a little bit from that CD.
Long ago, there was a man from the region of Cebu, a clever and carefree man. Like fine wine, his words were smooth, his guitar a seduction, his features handsome and proud. Never leave Cebu, he vowed. And yet he loved adventure. A merchant seaman was he. His route was San Francisco when Maximo went to sea. Take me to America, his brother begged him one day. Please, please, let me stow away. The journey was rough, you know. Little brother was quite weak. He died on the way over. For Maximo, all was bleak. I'll live little brother's dream, said Max in a fit of pique. Brother's story I will speak. He found other Visayans, survived Quake 1906, became an American. Fate does have its funny tricks. Survived the first pandemic, charmed as he was in his way. Cebu, now so far away.
So that was sort of from the beginning, one of the beginning few cuts from the CD, which was commissioned and is really a beautiful CD, which I don't know how common that is these days. There's a lot of beautiful photographic art on the CD cover,
Mm.
and it includes the entire text And it really is in itself like a documentary, I think.
Yes, a documentary in both music and images, and it really, tells a story of a community and of a family, and it's just, just really beautiful, a beautiful, a beautiful offering, musical offering.
Yes, so we'll play a little more of that a little later. The CD is called Sugilanan. Am I saying that correctly?
Sugilinan,
Thank you. Um,
Sugilinan, yeah.
Sugilanan. And we'll play a little more of that journey, and then we'll be talking even more about the journey with Carolyn herself next week. Live on WLBH, and then on some future episode of the Listening to Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. But Tony, you have some history in radio previous to doing this show. And
Yes,
why don't you
I'm
tell us a
guilty.
little? Yeah, like what brought you to radio before I go ahead and play this interview I did with Sharon Scott?
I had always been an eclectic music fan because I'm from a family who, listened to just about everything, and I was very fascinated, with the theatrical part of it, uh, being on a mic, playing music, sharing music. That was a big thing. So I worked in commercial radio for a while. There was a station back in California in Berkeley called KPFA, and person that I know named Norman Jayo, he was part of, or he was actually uh, the head of the training program where people could learn radio skills to become journalists and so on. And I went to one of his training sessions um, while I was studying radio at City College of San Francisco. And long story short, was I went to one session, and it was very community oriented. But for some reason in my mind, I felt that, or somebody had put in my mind that commercial radio was real radio, and what they were doing wasn't quite real.
Mm,
So I kicked around different radio stations for a while. I did country, I did top 40. And what I realized in hindsight was what they were doing at the community station was actually real radio. But I
right.
had to find
And
that out for myself.
actually, of
So,
course, KPFA is part of the original Pacifica network, of which we are
yes.
now an affiliate station of the Pacifica network. And I think that leads us well into the current state of affairs with community FM radio. Here comes Sharon. Hi, Sharon.
Hey, Martha.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm sitting here looking at your book,
Oh, great.
Low Power FM for Dummies.
That's the one.
It's a huge responsibility to run a radio station. So I'm sitting here in the audio garden contemplating these things as Listen and Be Heard Radio has acquired its permission to construct.
Congratulations. That is so exciting, Martha. I'm really happy
Thank you,
for you all.
WLBH. We acquired our call letters as well. And so I imagine that I am not the only one who has pulled my LPFM, Low Power FM for Dummies, back off the bookshelf and gotten to now chapter 4.
Great.
And I'm kind of scratching my head and saying, okay, we have a long way as far as having a radio station in our community. So maybe you could break down in your book, like what are the major, I kind of see it as, well, we need a radio station, obviously, so we need a studio to broadcast from, and then we need our antenna. And then we also need to be able to run a station, which takes money. So those 3 things are enough to make anybody scratch their head. I think the technology can be daunting. So maybe we could start with that.
Yeah, well, first of all, just congratulations again. It's really a big deal that you all got that license, that you even applied and then you got it and then you got the call letters you wanted. Like all three of those things are just really incredible and quite rare. As you know, the LPFM window hasn't happened for 10 years before this recent one. So it's not something that happens every day. It's not like every day you can ask the FCC for a license. You have to wait for these windows. And you all moved on it. I know there was a little negotiating on your tower site. Wasn't exactly where you wanted it to be.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm hoping I might still be able to negotiate with that.
Once you get the license, there is a lot of modifications you can do, places you can move it, as long as you have a great engineer to work with or a consultant.
So there was one of the first keys, a great engineer to work with. And I think when you're in the world of low power FM, that's like basically a community of engineers, maybe not the biggest one, but maybe they have the biggest hearts around the country, who all of us who recently got licenses will probably be turning to. Is that an accurate perception of the situation?
And it's interesting because there are, of course, a lot of radio engineers in the world, but there's just a very small number of them that are very dedicated to community radio and getting community voices on the air. So Todd Urich at Common Frequency, he was really out there advocating for this, letting people know about the window. I know he helped you all.
Yes, I have to give him credit where credit is due. He's definitely the reason that we got this license. Well, permission to construct, I should say.
I know he wouldn't let you all say no. At one moment you were reconsidering, and he said no.
No, he wouldn't, because another technical thing that people have to confront is that I originally wanted the antenna on the same property with the radio station. And for various reasons, what makes the most sense to me is to put the station here on Martha's Kitchen Garden. Unfortunately, right now, the antenna would have to be in a different location for us to do that. And so that in itself is another technical thing that has to be understood and overcome.
So we are like you, and like the majority of stations these days, their tower site is not where their studio is. And they're using various ways. Some people are using smaller FM transmissions to get their signal to their tower site with direct dishes. Other people are using just plain using the internet, creating a stream on the internet, and the tower site will have a computer there that picks it up and plays it. And then what we do, and many low power stations do, you have a codec, which is a pair of boxes, one at the tower site and one at your studio. And it takes the audio from your studio and sends it directly, again, over the internet, but through a dedicated line to that box at your tower site. And that's how most low power FMs are doing it today. Probably how you'll be recommended to do it by your engineers.
Recommended by?
Maybe Todd Urich at Common Frequency. We've got Michelle Bradley at Rec Networks. And there's so many great people at the Prometheus Radio Project.
And people can get involved with the GRC to meet a lot of these people, the Grassroots Radio Conference in New Orleans this year.
Yes, that's very exciting. The GRC is taking place in New Orleans, Louisiana this year, the weekend of September 26th. It'll be kind of starting a little before that weekend, but I highly recommend it. That's where I actually learned about the LPFM movement for the very first time when I went to the Grassroots Radio Conference a number of years ago. And I think, a lot of LPFM people will be at this conference, and we will have a track specifically set up for new stations to, learn about the technology, learn about managing the volunteers, learn about fundraising. We'll have all that kind of stuff going on at this conference because it's such an exciting time, and there will be so many organizations with new stations trying to get on the air. So mark your calendars, Louisiana, New Orleans. It's going to be spearheaded by WHIV. Mark Allen Derry is a infectious diseases doctor, and then WXDR, which is Dolphin Radio, Delgado Community College is the other main partner, and so that's going to be cool to have a college station involved with this one. Mm-hmm. It looks like WWOZ, a brilliant jazz station in New Orleans, and WTUL, Tulane Radio, and then a number of other radio stations that are in that area are all going to be working together on this. So it should be a really interesting event.
And a tremendous opportunity, I think, for those stations, those institutions that are grappling with the same things that we are here about how to just get on our feet.
Yeah. And I know it's a little nerve-wracking, but hopefully at this conference, again, Will and Pablito from the Prometheus Radio Project, I wanted to shout out to them. They've been a great, source of information. I'm sure that the Prometheus Radio Project will have a track and some events specifically for the LPFM stations at that. I know we'll be having a, low power FM for dummies type of roundtable where we'll have a bunch of different low power stations that have done it to be there to encourage you that you can, because I know it's very daunting right now, but if you just take it one step at a time, you can do it.
There's a reason that Wiley came to you to publish this book and considered you an expert, and I think rightly so, because you started WXOX, and I think what's one of the great things about your station, you are a part of the Pacifica Network, I do believe.
Mm-hmm.
But you actually air almost exclusively locally produced programming. I wanted to ask you, what's your motivation for having gotten into radio, and then how did you get to being so well hooked up with the community that you can actually do 24/7 local programming?
It's definitely a challenge, and we're always seeking new volunteers. In fact, in a couple nights, we'll have a community information session where people can just come out and learn about what we do at the station, how they can get involved, what it means to have a radio show, because it's a lot of responsibility every single week. So we're always trying to outreach to the community, let people know we're here. We do different tabling events. We sponsor music concerts. Of course, social media. And then we have about 120 volunteers, so their word of mouth alone really gets the word out. So once you get going and once you get on the air, people find you, they hear about you, they want to get involved. They say, this is really interesting. And I think what motivates them is the same thing that's motivated me to do it, is that, the name of your show, listen and be heard. People want to listen and they want to be heard. And and they don't want to listen to the same thing that all the commercial stations are giving them all the time. We have really found that the audience is responding well. Our community is really getting engaged with the local programming because it's people they know on air. It's bands they know. It's events that are happening like right now in our community. And so people are really interested in that, and they really engage with that. And, we've just really been surprised at how fast our station is just caught on like wildfire, and folks want to get involved and they send us their music.
But a lot of people are saying, radio, like, why do broadcast radio now when they say everybody, like everybody who's hooked up to a phone and the internet in one way or another, which is not everybody.
No, it's not.
I was surprised that my 20-year-old son, and some of his friends, they listen to the radio in the car, even though they have all these other options. So what do you think, though, about the future of broadcast radio?
Well, I like to think about this. It's so interesting to me that when we started our online stream 12 years ago, people were literally like, why are you doing that? And they were like, well, I'll tune it in, but nobody's going to listen online. Nobody listens on their computer. And I can't tell you how often we heard that. And we were like, well, just try it out, see what you think. And then people would be like, then they'd come to us and be like, wow, this is so cool. I'm like walking down at the river. I've got my phone. I'm listening to your station. And so, immediately you could tell that people were liking it. There's a lot of answers, for why radio is still relevant. And, I could really go on and on this theme, but quickly I would say that one, what you mentioned is that the entire population is not connected like we think they are. There's a lot of our population that still depends on that radio, that, the transmission is free to send out and to receive once you get the technology or whatever. And, all you need to do is go to the thrift store, buy a radio, and then, maybe some batteries. And so it's a very low buy-in if you want to listen to the radio. It's something that really is accessible to everyone. And we've worked with groups that serve the homeless population, and they know that radio is a lifesaver, that radio can get the word out. Tonight it's going to, go down really cold. You need to get to a shelter. Here's where you find the shelters, that kind of thing. So it's a lifesaver in those situations. It's also a lifesaver to the connected community when your connection goes down. 10 years of doing this, we've seen for sure that the FM is much more stable than the internet. If there's just some kind of heavy storm in the area, the internet goes down. I mean, everyone's experienced this.
Unless I guess your transmitter you're transmitting over the internet, then you might have a problem.
Right. So yeah, that's true. But we have a ability to go to where the transmitter is and have like a satellite studio there. So if we needed to put out emergency information. So hopefully you'll be able to do that at your spot too. Just set up, at least just a microphone there so that you can get out the information or emergency information if you need to.
Speaking of a backup plan, it's a responsibility to have a station, and I imagine that at some point you're thinking about maybe, stepping down from being station manager. How do we fundraise and see a future, see these radio stations survive beyond our own terms of whatever service we're doing in that organization?
I joke, I have an actual son, but I joke that this is his other sibling, that this radio station is really like a child of ours. My husband and I started it, and our son has grown up in the station, with the station.
Indeed, and really taken a leadership role. I observed
true.
some of that at the GRC, which was really wonderful.
Yes, he's started a teen radio academy, which he runs it. Pretty much, he runs it every summer for high school kids in the area. So, and he does his own radio show on Wednesdays, and so yeah, it's great to see him. I mean, people always ask, how do we get young people to listen? Well, you get young people to listen by putting other young people on the air, because that's what they want to hear. They want to hear their friends. So at some point, it will be time to let somebody else take over the reins. And I don't think it's right around the corner or anything, but I do think it's something we need to plan for and prepare for. And
it's kind of tied in with, I think it's kind of tied in with fundraising in some ways, like your mode of securing some security. I don't know, because that's something else to talk about, because people, I guess, pursue it in different ways. Underwriting or on-air fundraising, or I don't know, what else? What else can you do?
So there's a variety of ways to do that. One is, in a really good way, is through underwriting and sponsorships from different businesses in your area. And underwriting means this program is brought to you by Rainbow Blossom Food Market. They're located blah, 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 and you give a very factual, it's not an advertisement at all, but you can give some information about your sponsor. No sales, no money, strictly the facts. And you can do that, and businesses like that, because it's a way for them to connect with your listener that isn't throwing some advertising down their throat. It's saying, hey, we support this great station, you should support our business. And that works, that works actually really well. We find businesses are very excited to underwrite our station. Our main fundraising comes from the community, though, the listeners. We have not been successful at grants. I'm not really sure why, if that's political or what. I can write, I promise. And we have a great mission, but we just, for some reason, haven't scored those grants. So we've turned now to just getting, our listeners to support our station.
And do you do that on air or in other ways?
Yes. So the license holder, your organization, my organization, Art of Him, we can fundraise for our own organization on air. The license holder can fundraise for itself, but it cannot fundraise for other organizations. We can let people know about the great things other organizations do, but we can't actively fundraise for that. But we can, honestly, we could get on air every talk break and say, send us money. But probably people would want to tune us out if we did that. So we're very careful about when we ask for money, and we do it specifically one day a year. There's a nonprofit. Yeah, one day. We, we build people up in the months and weeks ahead. It's a project called Give for Good Louisville, run by the Community Foundation here in Louisville. And it's basically a friendly competition amongst local nonprofits to see who can make the most money in that one day. And then there's prizes throughout the day, if you get the most donors during a certain time period and all this kind of stuff. So we specifically just tell our donors, wait for that day, and it will make your donation go further. And we tell our listeners, if you support us enough on this one day, we won't ask again all year. And I guess they like that idea because they really come through for us.
Sharon Scott, I want to thank you so much for your time here in the audio garden, just talking about all of this. The author of Low Power FM for Dummies, part of the Wiley for Dummies series. And I would encourage people to go to their local bookstore and order it if they don't already have it there. Our listeners can listen to you streaming WXOX. Would that be .org or .fm?
It's actually artxfm.com. So you can listen on WXOX 97.1 FM. But if you're worldwide, you can listen on artxfm.com.
And you're also a part of the Grassroots Radio Conference, and I'd like to ask you to repeat the information about just not only the conference in New Orleans, but before that, I think there's Facebook groups or different ways people could get to you there.
There's a few places. You can go to LPFM Solidarity on Facebook. That's a great page for comments and questions. Just introduce yourself, let folks know you're there. You can come to the Grassroots Radio Conference. It's going to be in New Orleans the weekend of September 27th. And that's going to be an amazing, you'll just really have your mind blown being together with all these Grassroots Radio experts.
I think it's really going to be a unique conference with all those stations that you said are involved. That's just going to make it, not only that, but because it's in New Orleans.
Yes, and they're going to bring in a lot of special music and events, celebrating the culture of the area for the conference attendees. And you'll also get to go visit the different radio stations. So if you're planning to build a station, it's a great chance to take a peek at some other stations and how they do it. And there's a Grassroots Radio listserv that you can get on. Go to that LPFM Solidarity Facebook page, and I think that's really the best place to start getting plugged in, and then they can refer you to different resources and things like that. But, FM radio, we were talking about the importance of FM radio, but that is really the thing. It just connects the community. The whole community can turn in and hear it, and it weaves this web of sound throughout your area. And so that's another reason why it's so important. And then that web gets even bigger when the different community radio stations connect with one another and we share programming and ideas and things like that.
Both WXOX and WLBH are part of the Pacifica affiliate network. And so we could actually share each other's programming through that connection. Which there's affiliate stations around the country.
You convinced me, Martha, actually in our conversations, that it's actually really cool to rebroadcast some national program. Even though it's amazing to focus on your local community, amplifying local voices, it's also nice to give your local community access to these things happening in other communities. So I've kind of got a new attitude about that. I really appreciate that. And I think, it's still, very grassroots produced programming, so there's nothing commercial or anything about it. But you're hearing from different people in different parts of the country, and that's really important too.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I really appreciate the conversation today.
Thank you, Martha. I've really enjoyed it.
I hope to see you in New Orleans, actually. That should be, if possible, it should be great fun.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay, you take care.
Take care, Martha.
Thank you so much.
Good luck with everything.
This is WLBH.org, and we are in the audio garden. And my name is Martha CINADER. This is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. I'm joined by Tony Robles. Tony spoke with Ernie Brill last week on the Listen and Be Heard Hour, and this week we're going to hear his comments about banning books.
The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Once it's heard, it can't be unheard. Once it's published, it's not going to be unpublished. Once you read the poem, you can't unread it. No matter how an individual may try to push it to the side, forget about it, it's still in there. And it's the words, the meaning, the feelings behind it are taking root in their psyche, and they can't get rid of it.
This book is gay by Juno Dawson.
The thing about banned books, they were being banned for years, but in more subconscious ways. I want to do my master's on the straight poet Sterling Brown, who is the Negro head of the Federal Writers Project, for Christ's sake, taught at Howard for 30 years. He taught Stokely Carmichael. He taught Toni Morrison. I mean, I can't do it on him because he has one book of poetry, and all these white beatniks have one book of poetry. That was the hypocrisy. That was the racism. And these people are banned. There's a white guy who was a civil rights guy, and you can't find his poetry in any of these poetry magazines. You put his name in, like you see the name, like you, Martina Spada, and then a poem comes up, Tony Robles, Martina Spada, Lorna Cervantes. You put John Beecher's name, no, because he made the mistake of writing a book about his father's steel plant in 1920 in Birmingham called Reports of the Stockholders. And all these working class writers, some of whom are the greatest poets in the country, named Thomas McGrath, off the charts. Muriel Werkheiser. You don't see her in any anthologies, but I'll tell you something that's more interesting to me about the bannings. A lot of bannings are not as much about race, although they are. They're about trans and sexual stuff. These parents don't want their kids, they don't want their boys becoming girls and vice versa. And they don't want somebody coming into the bathroom and playing around with their kid. And they're vocal. They've always been vocal. And because of us at state and other people, the curriculum has finally gotten out underneath from their hands. Because for years, if you research it, there's the Gable family out of Texas. They were determining all the curriculum textbooks, like history. But we did too much, our generation and the generations after that, you, other people. And they don't know there's a revolution, And a lot of people don't get it. There's still teachers that don't know who Cave Canem is. And to me, if you're an English teacher and you don't know who Cave Canem or Kunderman is, you're just not paying attention. You're content to saying that same little racist canon, John Steinbeck and Faulkner and, the three great drunks of American literature, Faulkner, Hemingway, and Scott Fitzgerald. And none of them can even write a decent woman female character. I mean, that's an unorthodox approach on my part, but I've gotten hell for it. But I'm still standing by it.
This is the Listen to Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. My name is Martha CINADER, and those were comments made by Ernest Brawley, who Tony Robles interviewed last week here and in the audio garden. Let me play a little audio garden-y kind of music here or sounds for y'all. Now, how's that? Sounds a little more like the audio garden, doesn't it? There's an association called the McDowell High School Unheard Association in McDowell County school system. And they don't want to be identified by name, but they feel alarmed about the fact that on a Sunday, a preacher can give a sermon, and then on a Monday or a Tuesday, somehow that gets translated into people coming into their school and taking books off their shelves. So you spoke to some of these kids. What do you say about all of this?
Yes, it's a group of students from McDowell High School, and that would be in Marion, North Carolina, and in response to the grabbing or the taking of books off shelves because of the pressure exerted by a local pastor or minister, they formed this association. It's called the McDowell High School Unheard Association. And this started back in January of this year with the principal of the school, and this is very concerning for the students. They had actually had a Valentine's display with books, some books that addressed LGBT relationships, and those some of those titles, many of those titles were taken off. So they are they have a presence on Facebook. The again the McDowell Unheard, or actually McDowell High School Unheard Association. They have a page on Facebook, and they also have a page on Instagram. We have reached out to the principal of McDowell High School, uh, for an interview or to at least get her perspective. And we have not been contacted. She has not, she has not responded. But at Listen and Be Heard, we feel that we feel strongly about this issue, and feel that this is alarming.
Well, it's alarming
Have
when
somebody
we,
that exerts that type of
right, like we don't have this separation between what happens in church on Sunday and what's happening in our school libraries. I mean, not to criticize any one religion, but our schools and libraries are supposed to be free of religious influence, although we could certainly have religious materials in the libraries. It's a difficult situation when
yeah. I'd like to just read their mission. They sent us an email kind of detailing some of the events that facilitated their you know coming together and forming the group. Uh, and I'll just read a short excerpt. The McDowell High School Unheard Association is composed of a group of students at McDowell High School whose mission is to raise awareness on issues happening in McDowell County schools that directly impact its students. We want to give students who are ignored and marginalized a place to share their voice. Although we created the Unheard Association in response to the book removal going on in McDowell County schools, we are interested in talking about other topics that affect McDowell County students as they arise, and we believe that every student should feel seen, heard, and accepted in their school.
well, those certainly seem like valid goals, and I commend those students for their activism and their stance. And I hope that we can continue to follow up on the situation and hopefully get a response from the principal or someone on the school board. That's in McDowell County in North Carolina. And if there's a listener who actually resides in that area and would like to comment or get involved, please do. And people can comment about banning books. And we would like to hear what you have to say and play it on the show. You can find out how to do that by going to listenandbeheard.net. We have a contact form and ways to get involved and to volunteer as well. And I wanted to play a little more of Caroline Cabading's, and maybe I should read a little too from this. The form of the epic poem of the Kalinga tribe, and to the Kalinga people, their epic poem, De Ulalim, is not a theatrical art form, but rather considered to be a remembrance of actual history of the tribe that relates its origins, its victories, and its defeats, its heroes, and most importantly, the remembrance of how to be the best Kalinga person you can be in terms of ethics, morality, and family village cohesion. And that's the tradition that she's drawn upon to produce this CD, which I have to say, that description, Tony, doesn't immediately bring up an image of jazz in my mind, but this CD is nevertheless very jazzy in places.
A wonderful CD, And I think on the one of the California charts, it might be the world music chart. I'm not sure which chart it it was on, but I think it broke the top 20
Oh, really? Was there
on one of the charts. Yeah.
a particular cut on the CD that's doing that?
I don't know, but
Okay. I
it
guess we'll
did
have to find out.
it did land on one of the charts.
Well, I'm going to play this very jazzy one called My Soulmate.
Ayayam kuun paleke malese wap silapi sela oi Ayayam kuun palilong malese biok silopong sela oi My soulmate is the turtle swimming straight despite his hurdles because he's still free even now. My soulmate is a one-eyed cat. He jumps that fence and he don't look back because he's still free even now. And they show me how to stay strong as I try to right what went wrong. And they teach me how to not ask why, how to not ask why. You know my soulmate is a wingless bird. He rules his roost with his lovely words because he's still free even now. And they show me how to stay strong as I try to right what went wrong. And they teach me how to not ask why, how to not ask why. You know my soulmate is a wingless bird. He rules his roost with his lovely words because he's still free even now. Ayayam kuun paleke malese wap silapi.
And that was cut number 4, My Soulmate, from Sukilanon. And there's fully 26 cuts on that CD, which tells an epic story of immigration and coming to America and several generations. And we're going to hear more from that. And we're going to hear more from the woman who put all this together, Carolyn Julia Cabading. And thank you to Tony Robles, who sent me this CD with a return envelope, because I know he really wants it back, because it's a really beautiful looking CD. And if someone had sent it to me, I would want it back too. So I will put it back in that return envelope that's stamped and addressed and everything. And this is the part of the show of the Listen and Be Heard hour for readers and writers where I'm supposed to be talking about what I've been doing to get my latest finished novel published. But I'm asking you, Tony, first, what have you done to get anything published recently?
Well, I had a book that came out in September of last year, a poetry book called Thrift Store Metamorphosis, published by Red Hawk Publications in Hickory,
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina. I've written a follow-up collection of poetry, and like the last one, this one is also very much inspired by my place of work, and it's about my job in a warehouse, current job in a warehouse. So I finished a manuscript, and I think my publisher wants to go run with it. The tentative title is called "Where the Warehouse Things Are," and
Oh,
it's
that's
just
a great title.
poems about, yeah. So it's about the epiphanies and observances um, in working in a warehouse. I'm finding that the more I'm writing poetry, um, the more I realize that most of my poems are really epiphanies, with metaphors being kind of like the lens through which I can see the epiphanies. So yeah, it's a poetry collection, but it's an epiphany
Interesting.
collection
And
as well.
so you're fortunate to have the same publisher now wants to do another book.
They want to do another book, so yeah. Luckily, I have my mother who is she's a book coach, and she's also done some editorial work. So she's good at kind of formatting the manuscript. Um, so I'm hoping that we can get this published before the end of the year. Um,
Yes, Flo Mayberry,
and
the book doula. She was in one of
the
our
book, yeah,
episodes in season 1, if people are interested in looking that up. Um, well,
yes.
I'm glad that you have that going on, because the reason I deflected to you is because I have done nothing lately in the last couple of weeks to get my book published. And I don't know if it's because I'm just busy and have not made it a priority, or if I'm just
Mm,
like procrastinating or just disappointed. I did apply to the AWP mentor program, and I actually got turned down
hmm.
from that. Um, and I think I just got a little discouraged again, but I'm going to get back up on my horse. I'm a Sagittarian, so that's permissible thing for me to say.
Yeah,
I'm
I
going to
mean
get back
it's
on my horse, and I'm just going to keep trying.
yeah, I know it's yeah, it's one of those situations. I mean, I went to school at Vermont College, and a lot of my uh, advisors were either novelists or short story writers, and one of whom was a writer named Fernando Flores, who who lives in Texas, and he wrote a book called Valley-esque, which is a collection of short stories. But he also wrote a novel, and what he had told me was he had sent it out. He had gotten something like 40 to 45 rejections before he got that one, before he got that one acceptance, right?
Wow.
And
Okay. So I have about 40
yeah,
rejections to go then before I can say the same?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised because his books have been very well received,
Uh huh.
but he said that yeah he had gotten 40 rejections for his book, but
Well, there we
he
go. It's
finally got
always
that.
good to hear a story like that, especially when it actually has a good ending or at least a good progression. I won't say his story's over yet, but he got that published. It took him actually 46 tries. So I'm going to keep trying and not get discouraged. And in the meanwhile, we'll listen to some thoughts from another writer who we'll be hearing from next week on episode 16 of the Listen to Be Heard Hour for Readers and Writers. The COVID Poet Laureate of Albuquerque, New Mexico, Mario Ishii. I'm going to just play a few minutes from that to give you an idea of what's coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a while in my early adulthood, I was pretty bitter at how I was raised. But from this vantage, I can see what things it did for me. It carved out some real empathy for other people who are marginalized. So I was the least white, I guess you could say, person in the school. So I got a lot of harassment almost daily. And, I went home to a mother, this Appalachian woman. I would go home to her and she would say, well, Jesus won't let you have more than you can bear. And I used to think, well, he's really pushing it. But anyway, I think that having that experience gave me a real passion for human rights. We didn't have a television, but that was the devil's box. But he did subscribe to Life magazine. And so I got to read about the civil rights movement when I was a little girl. And I used to think they're fighting for me. And to this day, when I hear a speech by Dr. King, I start to cry. We have to draw strength from our ancestors because without their perseverance, we wouldn't be here today. And we also have to take the responsibility that we are becoming ancestors. Tanka is an ancient Japanese form that predates haiku, and it's not Zen like haiku. It was used actually to, like, for lovers would, the next day they would give each other a tanka to kind of reflect on the beauty of what their experience was the night before. And so it was kind of like love poems and lyrics. So the first haiku, or tanka rather, that I wrote was in the aftermath of Janice Mirikitani's death. She was the poet laureate of San Francisco and the part of the couple who was in Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco that feeds all the hungry and all of that. And I knew her well. She endorsed one of my books, and we developed a friendship. But when she died, I didn't know that she was even ill. And she never revealed that to me, even though we had been at 2 different programs together. And then I asked her about using one of her poems in a Taos Writers Conference workshop and everything. And she wrote to me 4 days before she died. And at the end of the email, she said, I love you. And I thought, that's really odd. And then she died. So I wrote this tanka. It just came pouring out of me. Leaves not meant to fall before the autumn dries them, drains them of their green. Were you always golden then to have left without a word?
That was the voice of Mario Ishii, who wrote a book of poetry called Sidewalk Cruise Ship. And she'll be joining us in the audio garden next week on episode 16 of the Listen to Be Heard Hour for Readers and Writers. Tony, it was so good to have you join us live. The Listen to Be Heard Hour is hosted by myself, Martha CINADER, and Tony Robles, live with me via Squadcast for the hour, which was a really great thing, and I hope that we can continue to do that. Our guests were Sharon Scott and also Amy Oishi, and we played some work from the CD Sugilanon by Carolyn Cabading. And we will be talking more about banning books and all of those kinds of things. My associate producer is DJ Jeannie Hopper, who also does some of the sound design, editing by Jeremiah Cothran, and background music and loops by J. Rodriguez Sierra, who you can find at jrodriguezsierra.com. The band book theme is by DJ Jeannie Hopper, with the voice and words of Yvette Murray. So what are you reading? What are you going to read tonight or tomorrow, Tony?
Well, I've been reading a lot of Japanese American writers. I'm actually going to be teaching a class in one of the master's programs in creative writing here in Asheville. And so part of this is just, conceiving of a lesson plan and a syllabus. But I've been reading the work of Hisai Yamamoto, who is a kind of a foundational Asian American writer who was interned during World War II in one of the internment camps, and her writing is very, very beautiful, and I plan on using her in my upcoming workshops.
Well, that sounds very interesting. I actually promised myself that I was going to finish both Village by Latasha Diggs and Sidewalk Cruise Ship by Mary Oishi. So I'm in the middle of doing both those things. And I want to thank our listeners for joining us this evening, for listening, and for allowing us to be heard. We'll see you next week for the Listen to Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. Bye, Tony.
All right.
Living it.